For years, we had thought of Bartholomew Kuma as a monster. He was the Bible-carrying giant who had split up our beloved Straw Hat crew across the world. The emotionless cyborg who attacked Ivankov at Marineford without a flicker of recognition, the tyrant whose very presence made seasoned pirates tremble, but it turns out that we were completely and utterly wrong about Kuma. Oda played the longest con within the history of manga as he hid the most devastating backstory behind the mask of One Piece's most feared warlord. Kuma has left his mark upon every major One Piece moment and every step of Luffy's journey towards becoming a pirate king. The man who we had assumed was a government weapon was actually a guardian angel planning the survival of the Straw Hats from the shadows while slowly dying on the inside. Kuma's backstory makes us rethink all of his actions, and it reframes the entire narrative of One Piece as a story of inherited will, from one man's ultimate sacrifice, which sets the stage for the next generation's triumph. 47 years ago, in the Sobe Kingdom, Kuma entered this world already marked for destruction. He was born to clap a full-blooded Buccaneer and an unnamed human mother. Kuma had pretty much inherited a death sentence from his parents. The Buccaneers weren't just another race within the world of One Piece, they were living reminders of something that the world government had desperately wanted to erase. The government's systematic extermination of Buccaneers had stemmed from their connection to the Void Century, as well as their knowledge of forbidden history and their natural resistance to oppression. When agents tracked down Kuma's family when he was just 4 years old, it wasn't just random, it was a calculated genocide. They captured not just Kuma and his Buccaneer father, but also his human mother, proving that loving a Buccaneer was crime enough to warrant enslavement. The years that followed destroyed the childhood of Kuma piece by piece. First, his mother had died from the brutal conditions of celestial dragon slavery, as her final moments were spent watching her son endure horrors that no child should witness. When Clap tried to comfort the young Kuma with stories of Nika, the warrior of liberation, because after he learnt of his mother's death, Kuma wished for death himself, but his father pleaded with him to endure. He had taught his son about the drumbeats of liberation which would echo through his entire life, but suddenly a celestial dragon had shot Kuma's father right in front of him. Clap's final gift proved to be more powerful than any torture. Those folklore tales about the warrior of liberation didn't just give Kuma hope, they gave him an unshakable purpose that would survive every attempt to break his spirit. The rhythm of liberation that his father had taught him would become his guiding principle, from his first act of heroism at God Valley to his final defiant punch against Saturn decades later. What occurred at God Valley transformed Kuma from a victim to a savior in the space of a single hellish day. The native hunting competition wasn't just another atrocity, it was designed to be the final solution to inconvenient survivors like the Buccaneers, which Kuma was a part of. These celestial dragons were so sickening that they treated human beings like game animals, competing for prizes while thousands had died for their entertainment. When fellow slaves dragged Kuma back to the hunting grounds, they weren't just desperate, they were trapped in the same system that had broken countless others. But meeting 15-year-old Ivankov and Genie changed everything. Here were two people who refused to accept their fate. They saw the Devil Fruit prizes not as impossible dreams, but as tools for their liberation. Kuma's decision to volunteer for their escape plan revealed his true character. While the others stayed silent out of fear, Kuma raised his hand because his larger body would help him survive. Even when facing certain death, he thought about protecting others first. That selflessness would define every choice that Kuma made for the rest of his life. Chaos erupted on God Valley after the Rocks Pirates and Roger Pirates had arrived, and this had given Kuma and his group their chance. Though Big Mom prevented Ivankov from claiming the Azure Dragon Fruit, Kuma managed to consume the Nikyu no Mi before anyone could stop him. Eating this devil fruit didn't just give Kuma power, it gave him the ability to literally push away suffering. But there was a cruel irony to this power, which we'll talk about later. Kuma was immediately confronted with Saint Saturn after gaining his devil fruit abilities, and this set the stage for their lifelong conflict. When Saturn declared that Buccaneers were born to be slaves, Kuma's response response was pure defiance, as he would save as many people as possible, just like Nika would. Saving over 500 people that day on the God Valley incident wasn't just an act of heroism, it was Kuma announcing to the world that the stories that his father had told him were real. Ivankov's declaration that he possessed the hands of liberation became a true prophecy. After he had escaped from God Valley with Ginny, Kuma returned to the Sobe Kingdom and made the church his home. By the age of 17, he'd formalized his role in the community as a designated sufferer by becoming their pastor. Every Sunday, he'd use his devil fruit to absorb the chronic pain of elderly villagers who were unable to afford medical care or survive King Bikori's crushing taxation policies. The irony of Kuma's power is that every beautiful act of kindness was a personal hell for him. Unlike other useful devil fruits, the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi demanded sacrifice in exchange for removing that pain. Pain doesn't disappear as it has to go somewhere, so Kuma became a living repository for his community's suffering, as he endured their agony so others could have brief moments of relief. These weren't just medical procedures, they were acts of sacrifice performed on a weekly basis. During this period of time, Kuma also formed genuine friendships with local children who initially bullied him for his size. After Ginny defended him and he used his powers to heal their injuries, they became a close-knit group. These relationships showed Kuma what normal childhood friendships could look like, even as his own past trauma prevented him from fully embracing such innocence. Ginny's frustration at Kuma enduring all of this pain had come from love and not selfishness. She had watched Kuma, the man that she had adored, torture himself weekly while she nursed him back to health, which must have been a form of agony for her. Ginny made several marriage proposals to Kuma, which weren't just romantic gestures, they were desperate attempts to give meaning to their shared suffering. Kuma refused to marry Ginny because his love for her was so pure that he couldn't bear the thought of her suffering his mother's fate. The very bloodline that made him strong enough to help others also made him too dangerous to love. He'd rather endure loneliness than risk Ginny becoming another casualty of Buccaneer persecution. Kuma's clash with King Bikori's forces over the imprisonment of elderly villagers led to his own arrest alongside Ginny and their friends. Their rescue came in the form of Dragon and Ivankov's freedom fighters who overthrew Bikori and recruited the group. This was the moment that had marked Kuma growing from a local healing priest to a global revolutionary. He quickly became one of the founding pillars of what would become the Revolutionary Army. Kuma held the rank of army commander and he wielded significant influence over the organization's direction. His unique combination of overwhelming strength and tactical intelligence made him invaluable in liberation operations across the Grand Line. During this period, he also took on a mentoring role as he trained young recruits, including a teenage Sabo in combat techniques and revolutionary ideology. Kuma's involvement in major revolutionary operations included the Great Terminal Incident in Goa Kingdom, where he worked alongside Dragon to rescue survivors from the aristocracy's attempt at genocide. It was during this mission that Kuma first noticed Dragon's unusual behavior around the area. Eventually, he deduced that Dragon had family connections there, specifically a young boy who would later become Monkey D. Luffy. The Revolutionary Army structure allowed Kuma to continue his periodic returns to the Sobe Kingdom, where he maintained his role as the community's protector. However, this dual life came crashing down when Ginny, now a captain in the revolutionary forces, was captured during a mission. For a few agonizing years, Kuma had no contact with the woman that he loved, knowing that she was suffering at the hands of a celestial dragon who had married her, while he was powerless to save her. Ginny's capture transformed Kuma into a reckless berserker who had exhausted himself in battle, fighting with a fury that alarmed even his fellow revolutionaries. His transformation from a defensive pacifist to an aggressive fighter reflected his growing understanding that some evils cannot be reasoned with and they should only be destroyed. Dragon couldn't authorize a rescue mission for Ginny as the risk to the entire movement was too great. So Kuma raged against every government force that he could find, hoping that violence may fill the hole where Ginny used to be, but it didn't, because when she finally contacted them, she revealed that she was dying from sapphire scales disease and she had a 2-year-old daughter. Kuma rushed to their old church as he found Ginny's corpse and a baby Bonney, his beloved final gift that was born out of this tragedy. The sapphire scales disease that killed the mother was already showing within the skin of Bonney. Standing over Ginny's grave, Kuma made a promise that would destroy him. He swore to raise Bonney, stating that he'll protect her and find a way to save her from the sapphire scales. Little did Kuma know how those words would be sealing his fate. The nightmare of any parent is to outlive their child, and Kuma faced something worse than this, watching his adopted daughter slowly dying from the disease that had killed her mother, knowing that at best Bonney only had 5 years to live. Kuma had lied to her in order to give her hope, stating that she would be cured by the age of 10. In order to spend more time with her, Kuma had resigned from the Revolutionary Army. Every second that he was spending on missions was a second not searching for a cure for his daughter. His solo pirate career then followed, because every island, battle, and bounty hunter that he crushed were just obstacles between him and somebody who might have a cure for his daughter. Dragon then revealed to him that somebody could help. The individual's name was Dr. Vegapunk, the world's smartest man, who was recently relocated to Egghead after the Punk Hazard incident. If anyone could cure sapphire scales, then it would be Vegapunk. So we learned that Vegapunk does have the ability to cure Bonney, as it was simple stem cell treatment, which was a piece of cake for a genius like him, but all he wanted in exchange was some blood samples in order to create cyborg soldiers based on Kuma's Buccaneer biology. This was a strange request, but what father wouldn't make that trade? But then one of the 5 elders, Saint Saturn, appears. He had been monitoring Vegapunk's communications and he decided to add some terms to this medical transaction. So now, in exchange for Kuma saving his daughter's life, he would have to become a government dog as one of the 7 warlords. He also had to give them permission to transform him into a cyborg weapon and have his entire personality erased, and he was to never see Bonney again after her cure. Each demand was a calculated form of psychological torture by Saturn. He was supposed to serve the world government that murdered his parents. He was going to lose his body piece by piece and die while he is still breathing, and the price that he pays for saving his daughter's life is that he could never hold her again. Vegapunk protested Saturn's requests as he begged for literally any other arrangement, but Saturn's response was basically cope harder, science boy, and Kuma just said yes to all of these conditions. Yes to becoming a weapon for his parents' killers, yes to losing his memories and his personality as he slowly dies, and even agreeing to saving Bonney's life even if it means that she never knows why her father had disappeared. The next 6 months at Egghead were heaven and hell mixed in a blender. There were pizza parties with Sentomaru and Kizaru as he was teaching Bonney the rhythm of liberation, building genuine friendships while knowing that they were watching him die. Every laugh was a form of a goodbye, and every moment of joy came with an expiration date. When he left Bonney in Sorbet for the final time, his words weren't just a farewell, they were a father's entire heart compressed into a single moment, as he says to her, "Thank you for being born." Every move that Kuma had made as a warlord was a chess piece that was positioning for a game that his opponents didn't even know that they were playing. That Bible that he carried was filled with notes about islands that he visited, as he was searching for cures that no longer mattered, but he was documenting them anyway for Bonney's future adventures. Those letters that he sent her that never arrived thanks to CP8's interference, each of those letters had a piece of his soul attached to them as he was trying to parent Bonney from across the ocean while he was slowly losing his humanity. None of these letters had reached Bonney despite her looking for them day in and day out, hoping that she would receive a letter from her father. It would be heartbreaking if Bonney never got to read those letters, but thankfully after she had accessed Kuma's memories during the Egghead Island arc, she was finally able to learn about all of those letters that her father had written to her. Kuma's appearance at Thriller Bark wasn't about eliminating witnesses to the defeat of Moria, it was an audition, because he genuinely needed to know whether if the Straw Hats were worth betting humanity's future on. When Zoro offered his life for Luffy without hesitation, when he stood there after taking all of his captain's pain and said nothing happened, Kuma saw it, the unbreakable will that legends are built on. Also, that small piece of intelligence gathering with Nami where he asks about Ace confirms what he had suspected since tracking Dragon to Goa, that this rubber boy was more than just another pirate. The comment about Dragon having a good son with a loyal crew, that was Kuma mentally signing his last will and testament. Between the events of Thriller Bark and Shabodi, he'd visit Egghead for modifications as he slowly felt his consciousness slipping away procedure by procedure. They saved his head for last because Saturn wanted him fully aware of what he was losing. During one session, he watched a teenage Luffy training in the East Blue Forests using abilities that Kuma recognized as divine comedy. This was the next Nika practicing his craft, while the present era's greatest believer of Nika was preparing to die. When he appeared at Shibundi, it wasn't for government business. He had actually come to see Bonney one last time before she had entered the new world. Then Luffy ended up punching a celestial dragon, which had left Kuma with a very difficult choice. Kizaru, his old friend, the man that he had shared pizza with while Bonney was laughing as a child, was about to murder Dragon's son and the crew that Kuma had identified as the world's next hope. If he were to intervene, then it would blow his cover and risk Bonney's life and destroy everything that he had sacrificed to build. On the other hand, if he were to stand by and do nothing, then the world government would figure out Luffy's potential and wipe them out in a single afternoon. Kuma whispered a confession to Rayleigh as he told him, "I work for the Revolutionary Army," stating, "Since we have a connection, I want to help this group escape." So each of the Straw Hats that Kuma had touched disappeared to an island from his warlord travels. These were not random destinations but carefully chosen training grounds for the Straw Hats. Luffy was sent to Amazon Lily where he'd find Hancock and learn about Haki. Zoro was sent to Mihawk's Island to study under the world's greatest swordsman. Nami was sent to Weatheria to master meteorology. While viewers were left heartbroken, Kuma was in fact preparing the Straw Hats for the new world. His final words to Luffy were, "We will not be seeing one another again. Farewell." In this moment, Kuma was figuratively passing the torch that he'd carried since God Valley. His Hands of Liberation had helped give birth to the sun god Nika, the Warrior of Liberation. Back at Egghead Island, for Kuma's final procedure, he made two last requests that proved love transcends consciousness. First, he expelled his memories into a bubble for Vegapunk to study, ensuring that some piece of him would survive even when PX-0 didn't. Second, he asked for one final mission to be programmed into a soon-to-be empty head. This is to protect the Thousand Sunny until a Straw Hat had returned at Shibodi. If you think about this, his last conscious thought wasn't about revenge or regret, it was making sure that those kids would have a home to come back to. Vegapunk, along with us, wept as he pulled the lever. In his final conscious moments, Kuma smiled, as the once legendary Bartholomew Kuma that we have come to know and love had died, and he ended up becoming the PX-0. Kuma was smiling because he had won a game that the world government didn't even know that they were playing. The mindless years that followed were truly tragic for everybody who had come to know Kuma. He couldn't feel Ivankov's tears at Marineford. He was unable to understand why Ivankov kept referring to him as a friend despite PX-0 trying to kill him. Doflamingo had even referred to PX-0 as being dead, not knowing that his memories and personality were wiped from him. After the collapse of the Warlord system, they turned Kuma into a rental slave for the Celestial Dragons. The same world nobles who murdered his parents were now using him as a horse, stabbing him with swords for entertainment, as they referred to him as an invincible slave. But then Sabo and the revolutionary commanders risked everything to rescue him from the reverie. Saturn had then activated the self-destruct switch on Kuma with the intent of killing him and potentially any revolutionaries that were close to him, as he assumed that Vegapunk had put a bomb inside of his body. But thankfully, Vegapunk was too disgusted at this point to place a bomb inside Kuma, so instead he had placed an alternative shutdown protocol which would permanently shut down all of the programming and systems of Kuma when that self-destruct switch was activated. This means that it would turn him into a vegetative state. left. Kuma then escaped from the revolutionaries as he started to climb the Red Line. Despite receiving considerable damage from the Marines, Kuma was still able to run away even after he was attacked relentlessly by Akainu. We learned that Kuma had finally made his way to Egghead Island, where he had saved Bonney from Saturn. Kuma's fist, which was coated in armament haki, had delivered a devastating punch to Saturn, as Vegapunk recalls that he just put Kuma in a vegetative state, but it seems like Kuma's actions here are defying all reason, and this may be thanks to his Buccaneer heritage, as we finally see Kuma hugging Bonney after everything that he had gone through. Bonney expressed her gratitude for all of the selfless acts that Kuma had done up until that point. When Saturn emerged from the rubble, furious, he demanded Vegapunk to explain what on earth is going on. Vegapunk states that Kuma's actions can be best described thanks to the power of love. Oda has done a truly incredible job of solidifying the legacy of Bartholomew Kuma. It's been a long time since I've read about a truly selfless, loving, and transformative character as Kuma. That moment when Vegapunk had pulled the lever had me crying my eyes out. It was one of the most emotional moments in One Piece for me. They removed his humanity, transformed him into a mindless weapon. But when it mattered the most, Kuma regained a fraction of his consciousness so that he could protect that one person that he loves the most. The rhythm of liberation that Kuma's father had taught him, that small glimmer of hope while they were trapped with the celestial dragons, this is what had guided Kuma into helping Luffy to become the warrior of liberation. Without Kuma, Luffy would not have made it up until this point within the story, and he would not have become Nika. I'm so impressed with Oda's storytelling and how he had played the long game with Kuma's character, and just from this backstory alone, he's easily become one of my favorite characters in the series. But we have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you guys think about the backstory of Kuma and how it links to the plot of One Piece? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.